Welcome back to the Process podcast with me, Ron Flanagan, and I am delighted to be back. Today, in episode 3, I am delighted to be joined by Máire Treasa Ní Cheallaigh, who is best known for her work with Off the Ball, RTE, TG4 and Eir Sport. She is also a qualified Sports and Exercise Psychologist and a current medicine student. In this episode, we talk about the places Máire Treasa has visited while working as a journalist, the psychology of playing at home, and her go-to Supermac order. Don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and go follow my Instagram page at ProcessPodRF or my Twitter page at ProcessPod_RF for upload announcements. And without further ado, let's get on with the show. Fáilte go dtí on the Process podcast, Máire Treasa.
Gurmí Margaret.
So I suppose first of all, do you mind introducing yourself to those listening in that might know who you are?
Oh God, how do I introduce myself? I am from Cheallaigh in Connemara originally. Studied for my first degree in NUI Galway, Fadon Law, and did a degree in Gaeilge agus Psychology. Did the R Diploma to Commerce Daimach and enjoyed that. Ended up working in media from RNG, TG4, Nucht, News into sport. Still dabbling in media because it's paying for my second career, which is sports psychology and medicine. So yeah, you could argue that my 20s were a journey of discovery, and I am like most people, which is I know a lot but I'm a master of nothing. So that's me in a nutshell. I'm from Galway. I love Galway. I don't get to go there often enough, and any excuse, I'm back there. It's the best place in the world.
And like when you started working in the media, was that an ambition from the start, or did you've moved on now to look at different careers? Would the media have been your first interest, or was there any other sector?
Yeah, media definitely would have been my first interest, and it stands to reason because I was a young child when TG4 had opened up, or Teenagy as it was at the time, over the road. It was very glamorous. There was lots of jobs. They were all young, vibrant people. They were getting to do really cool things. And it was an opportunity to stay at home, which was great as well, because as you know, rural Ireland, there's not many good jobs, and TG4 was a great way of getting them. But all those kind of things, it just fed into it. And people used to always tell me, you're a great talker. And like, yeah, I talk a lot. That doesn't mean I'm great. But, I enjoyed it. And I was good at languages. I was good at Gaeilge. I was good at English. And they were things I enjoyed. And I loved talking to people. So communication really was my appeal. As I got a bit older, I probably realized that while I was good at communicating and while I enjoyed having the chats with people, I probably wasn't ideal to be a journalist. I didn't enjoy it. And don't get me wrong, that's not fair actually. I did enjoy it at the start. I probably just did it too long. And so I added variety into it by moving to Dublin, working for RT News, working as GA reporter under Marty Morrissey for a summer, which was great fun. But I always had an itch that I kind of realized as I went through my 20s that hole was there. Yeah, I loved chatting to people. I love knowledge. I love information, but I wasn't getting enough out of my day job. And I was also kind of held a bit with the whole, I realized I was very, very lucky to have that day job, because this would have been around, I got that job around 2010 when nobody had any jobs, especially in media. God, nobody was hiring journalists back then. And I got a full-time permanent pensionable RT contract, and you held on to that thing. But after a few years, I realized I wasn't holding on to it. It was holding on to me. I wasn't happy. And that's not to say it was a bad job. I just did it for too long. So I decided to take stock and said to myself, what does it do I like? And I realized I love thoughts. I love thinking about thinking. I love the concept of psychology. I love sport. So why not study sports psychology? So I went down that road and I loved it. And it kind of reopened the door, because I don't know about you, but in my early 20s, I had no confidence in myself or my intellectual ability. I'm not saying I'm a complete brain box or anything, but I think we can all achieve more than we think we could in our 20s, which we realize as we go on a little bit more in life when you're a little bit older like myself. And I just wanted to learn a bit more. So I did the sports psych, and I did honestly think about doing a PhD in sports psychology. But then I don't know why, it just I remember reading an article about graduate entry medicine and how you could be from a background of fashion design, shoemaking, nursing, reading, writing, and you could apply for this. Yeah. So I did, and somehow I got in, and I'm loving it. And funnily enough, what do I love about it? I love the communicating. I love the learning. I love having the chats with patients. So yeah, and then I'm very lucky that I get to complement, well, not at the moment during this COVID age, but very lucky that I'm able to work along as I'm studying and pay my fee via working in sports broadcasting, which is something I really love. And when the day comes out to put that microphone down, I'll miss it.
Absolutely. And I suppose you mentioned there the our diploma in Gummersod. Would you say that was a good grounding for you kind of when you started off?
Do you know what? It is and it isn't. I always say these courses and degrees, I mean, I'll put it this way. What I'm learning now, my medical degree, is very applicable to real life. And I kind of compare it to learning to become a carpenter or a plumber, because you're learning by doing. And you could argue with the art diploma that you're learning by doing, but you're not really, because I don't know, unless the course has changed, I found that we were often made things to do the proper way. And I'm sorry, but ain't nobody got time to do things the proper way in the real world, or the proper way has moved on so much. But at the same time, it gives you good grounding in, you know, deadlines, how hard it is, the challenges to get people to talk to you. They're all very good. But I found that, like most people who've done any kind of media course, and it's not to shade any media course, it's not their fault, it's not real life. You kind of go into the real world and you do your first day in the real job and you're exhausted and you go home and you think, my God, I have to do this all over again tomorrow. And that's the thing. So to be honest, I think if you've got a natural aptitude for technology or a natural aptitude for journalism, you can probably work in media just as well as somebody who's done the OR diploma if you have the skills, if you have the knack for it. But at the same time, if you don't have the knack for it, the OR diploma might get your mind thinking that way. But all that doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, you're not going to get a job at the moment now without something like that. So it's a bit like the leaving cert. It mightn't suit you, but you got to do it to get on the ladder.
Like I always felt that, especially kind of if you don't have a flair for it, or if you don't have, you know, I suppose, yeah, maybe flair is probably the best word. Like our course at the moment, like if you don't, like, it's grand studying all the books and stuff like that, but if you can't, you know, be natural and have just a natural conversation with someone, that you're not going to do anything. Like,
yeah, and there's pros and cons to that, because back in my day when we lived in the world of black and white in 1912, we didn't have the whole social media and smartphone distraction that people have today. So we had to talk to people. Like, you had to ring people up and their parents would answer the phone and say, hi, can I speak to Joe? That's gone now. So we had natural conversation skills that I think people, possibly the next generation after me, might not have. On the other hand, the great advantage most people in your class have, and I'm guessing they're all in their early 20s for the most part, the big advantage you guys have is that you're used to being on screen. YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, you're all on it. You're all broadcasting from the day you're born anyway.
yeah.
So that's a massive advantage that we didn't have, that we had to learn. It took me ages to be comfortable on camera. God, every once in a while, TG4 will show up some stuff I did back in the day, and I cringe. I was so stiff. I was uncertain. I had no confidence. I couldn't believe what the hell I was doing in there, you know. And I think that's the big imposter syndrome is in every job and in every industry when you're starting out, except I suppose when you're doing it on telly, people can see it, and that's the worst part about it. Whereas at the very least, you go into an accountancy firm, only the people who work in your office know you've been a doofus for the day, you know.
Yeah, and like having the two languages, like the Béarla agus the Gaeilge, like would they have been very beneficial for you when it came to looking for an employment, or do you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, Gaeilge is what opened the door for me. Hustling or in the G, and then Choma said good the TG4. And it was from working in Luke TG4. And I remember the former Western editor in Galway, Jim Fahey, was ruling the roost at the time. And every once in a while, even Jim would take a day off. And if you were working on a day that Jim was off and something happened and he wasn't in town, RTE be asking you, can you do this for us? There's no way. I mean, anyone in RTE will deny this, but there's no way they would let me in through that gate in Donnybrook with my Connemara English back in the day. And I learned the hard way. I learned that, you know, I am from Galway. I'm not going to change how I sound. And I just learned to maybe enunciate my words a little bit better and that kind of thing. And that was a decision I made. There's people who don't bother doing that. I did it. And I think it's also because I had to learn my English. So I learned spoke English. So people always say, geez, your English is very posh. I say, no, it's not. It's just it's foreign English. You know, my Irish is as rough as can be, you know, but I had to learn English, and I was 5. I remember learning English, whereas I was born like Gaeilge. But it definitely helped, and it definitely opened doors in RTE. Like, I remember one example, which I always, 2 examples. One, I went out with the Irish Army to the Golan Heights and Beirut, and that was really cool. And the reason I was sent out was that 1, Andy Kenny was going out, 2, Simon Coveney was going out, 3, they got bang for their buck, because when I went out, I was bringing home content as Gaeilge and in English. So straight away, that made more sense than me. Also, think that often happened. And I remember the historic visit when Michael D. Higgins went to visit the Queen in England. They had me in the village, in the town of Windsor, as the carriages are going by and everything on their special programme, because they thought, wouldn't it be cool to have an Irish speaker at County Mairga after 900 years of oppression? You know, so you got great opportunities like that. And the thing about working at Gaeilge as well is it's a nice little community. People help each other. People are nice to each other, and you're pushed along by that wave. And there was definitely, I was probably a bit too young first, maybe I was a few years older. There was a wave of Gaeilge before us who really broke the mold. They were young people. They weren't born in the confines of Dublin 4, like the Dahi O'Shea's, the Grania Shoigas and them. And they opened up the road for us, and then it made it very easy for the likes of us. And I'd like to think, I hope, that we're helping along the next generation, you know?
And like, you were saying on a view, along with the medicine degree, you're doing a bit of freelance work as well. Would working as freelance, that may afford you to be more flexible? To say if someone like a young journalist wants to start off, would you advise them either to go straight into work, trying to get a job in a company, or would you tell them to go freelance?
Oh, it's kind of asking how long is a piece of string. It depends what your goals are. Depends where you want to be. It depends where you want to end up. It depends if you want a stable job or if you don't mind the instability. It depends. Do you want a mortgage? To be honest, I'm in between two minds in this, because I often tell people, Jesus, don't go doing media degrees now. They're a waste of time, because you don't have any stability out of it. And that doesn't bother some people, but it really affects others. So I think you need to assess yourself, and you need to accept you probably will have to upskill and change a lot. I mean, I didn't have to do it. I chose to do it. But I think as media is changing, you know, newspapers are shedding staff, radio stations are shedding staff. You know, that's uncomfortable. Some people don't mind it. And I do have a big fear that we're going to end up in about 20 years' time that the only people who can afford to be journalists, and journalism is a very important job, as we've seen the last few days in the whole Barry Cowan thing. And, you know, the only people who'll be left able to afford to do journalism will be children of middle-class parents in Dublin who won't have to worry about paying rent, won't have to worry about paying bills. There's no way on what a freelancer would make now that I could have left Carrow to move to Dublin to pursue my dream of journalism, for argument's sake. And that's going to keep people out. It's already an industry which doesn't have much diversity. It's getting better when it comes in regards to women, but still a long way off. And I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. But I often tell people, you know, do another degree and then maybe do what you've done, your diploma afterwards. You've only committed a year of your life and maybe a year of fees to it, because you might not get a job at all, or you might end up as Miriam O'Callaghan. And that's the difference. You just don't know which way it's going to go. But at the other hand, if you're in your 20s and you're free and no obligations, and all you need to do is worry about food in your belly, maybe a few pints at the weekend, and a bed to put your head down in, why not give it a whirl? You can have really cool experiences. I've met people all over the world. There's not a highway or byway in Ireland I haven't travelled. We've had great days on the road, and you make great friends, like with the press pack, you know, people who'll have your back for life. And you get to meet cool people and things like that, but it's not for everyone. And as I got older and more into it, I realized the job was getting more out of me than I was getting out of it. And burnout is a huge issue. And at the very least, yeah, I know medicine has burnout as well, and lots of other industries, but you're paid better. Yeah. And you've more kind of stability. And, you know, if you take holidays, you won't come back and somebody will be sitting at your desk, and there's a pay scale, and you get a mortgage, and that's kind of important as well. Yeah. So I don't know is my long and short answer. You need to weigh up yourself and see where it is you want to go. But would I recommend it as a career where you think, no? I would often say, jeepers, you know, if you're going to do that, maybe marry a teacher. But who's going to mind the kids? Like, if you think about it, like the days when I worked, like on the 6, 1 and the 9, if a story broke, you were driving to God knows where, you were there till say if you had to do a live on the 9 o'clock news, you were driving back, it was late at night, and then it was a big story, and if nobody else was around, you'd be the reporter on Morning Ireland the following morning. But that just didn't happen all the time. But at the same time, it happened enough to me to make me realise this wasn't the life I wanted, because whenever I was going on Morning Ireland, I used to be petrified of making a mistake. I wouldn't sleep a wink, and then I'd be petrified of sleeping through my alarm. Like, it was awful. Like, some people thrive with that. I obviously didn't have the personality for it.
And I suppose then we'll move on to the kind of sports exercise psychology. What's involved? Like, what would be involved? What's the main aim of the kind of what would be the main aim of a sports psychologist or a sports and exercise psychologist?
I always use the line, making good people better. It's not about fixing problems. It's not about making depressed people better. We're not qualified to deal with things like depression and things, which is an image people have. And we're not there to come in to fix problems, which again is an image people have. I think there's still too many teams and athletes out there and coaches and managers who'll only ring a sports psych when things are gone really bad. And then you're meant to come in with a magic wand and fix things over one session that they're hoping to get for free. And it doesn't work that way. You know, like your mind is a muscle too. So coaches don't expect strength and conditioning coaches to come in and fix everyone with one gym session for the season. Yet people seem to expect that we're going to be able to do it. And the same with exercise psychology. Like you'd work with people who've got issues with exercising for one reason or another, or maybe people are coming out of mental health disorders and they know exercise helps them along and they want a bit of advice to work along with that. And those people are a bit more reasonable. They understand it's not a one-night process. That's the biggest issue. So trying to educate people as to what it is. It's not somebody coming in saying be the ball, feel the ball, see the ball. No, it's proper mental science, and it's mental skill science, and it's trying to get people to buy into that. And the trouble is too, it's an unregulated industry. So you have a lot of people out there calling themselves sports psychologists and they're not. You have a lot of people out there, coaches and managers, who seem to think, if I'm there with all my letters after my name and there's a lad who's won All Ireland medals who's calling himself a mental skills coach, they'll go to him. But all the research out there tells you sometimes the best player is not the best coach, and he or she is not qualified to do what I can. Like I always tell people, if you needed heart surgery, you're not going to go to the person who had a heart attack. Just because they lived it doesn't mean they can do it. You want to go to the cardiologist. And the same is true with sports psych. So it's a hard road to travel. I think we're getting there. Every year it gets a bit better.
And you were saying there that, some coaches expect to have one session and that's it. I know that Caroline Currid, she's worked with a lot of teams, and I think she worked with the Limerick Hurlers. And I remember John Kiley, the Limerick manager, was kind of saying that they had her all throughout the year. But would you say that's way more beneficial than, like, as you said, one session?
Absolutely. It's very beneficial to make sure you have an accredited sport and exercise psychologist. I mean, first of all, I always tell people, if you're thinking of hiring one, for the love of God, ring up the Irish Sport Institute, because you'd be amazed the amount of people out there, some quite well known as well, that have just done the circuit locally or regionally, whatever, who haven't got the letters after their name and haven't done the groundwork. Like, it's not enough to have a master's in sports psychology. You need to go off then and do 200 days of supervised practice. And then you need to put in another kind of submission to a board in the Irish Institute of Sport. And then they decide if you're qualified to be meddling with people's minds. And lots of people haven't bothered to do that. So that's the first thing I would tell people is really important. Second of all, absolutely, it makes complete sense to have somebody there, all the time. Like, nobody thinks should we just bring the physio along on match days or whatever, or the Máire Ishka is only there on match days. No, they're there involved in the whole thing. So the psych should be there as well, because when you think about it, I'm a woman, I'm coming into a room, we'll just say the Galway Hurlers as an example. Like, if they only see me once in a blue moon, why the hell would they talk to me? Why would they trust me? Why would they believe in me? Why would they see me? And then also, what impact can I have with that short sense of time? Whereas at the very least, if I'm there all the time, if I'm observing how people are behaving, if I'm observing training, if I'm observing matches, I'm observing what's happening on the sideline. A lot of the time, again, people have this attitude of guruism with sports psych, but a lot of the time we're just people who are well trained to communicate and say, I'm not sure the way you're talking to that person is the best way to get the message across, or I'm not sure they're understanding this, and I can tell you this because I've observed it. And somebody who can deliver that message in a safe way, that's not bringing blame, that's keeping everybody safe, and that's also helping people build their confidence and also measuring people's progress. I mean, it is a science, and a decent sports psychologist will be doing things like measuring metrics, seeing how things are going, and then doing group sessions and one-on-one as well. And you can't do that on a session at the start of the season or the night before you're about to go into a relegation playoff.
I was actually sent in a question here from an individual athlete who's big into running and he's done very successful, but he was asking, like, would you think he's more likely to learn if he finishes on the podium or doesn't finish on the podium? I suppose it depends on himself, really.
Yeah, it depends how open his mind is. You can learn a lot by losing, because you can, but that only works if you're willing to go back and do the mental work and see what happened. Was it mental? Was it physical? Was it a mixture of both? When did it happen? Where did it happen? What can I do? If you win, again, this is even more important. There's a lot of people out there who win or do well and don't bother because, they've won it. It's a bit like the person who says, I work on TV, I never watch myself back. You got to watch yourself back every once in a while just to see how to improve things. So the key there isn't winning or losing. It's the willingness to work with somebody, preferably, really, because at the end of the day, it's quite difficult to critique yourself. Work with a professional or somebody who you really trust to say, what can we work on and make things better? I mean, just because you win doesn't mean you can't win better the next time.
Yeah. And then another question then is, my local team always get better results while at home with majority of their own supporters. Why does that team struggle then when they get away from home? Like, they don't know where they're going to, or would there be a reason for that, kind of unfamiliar surroundings? Or
yeah, that's another how long is a piece of string question. There is plenty of research out there that shows people we do have better records at home. Be that because of familiarity, be it because you've got more supporters there. Is it because the referee is more easily swayed for the home side? It's probably a mixture of all those things. And also, when you think about it, everybody knows their local football or hurling pitch or whatever, a soccer pitch inside out. So you know where the little divot is, you know where the best place to place the ball for a kick is, all those kind of things. And all those little fine margins add into possibly, if a game is 50-50, possibly going your way. On the other hand, if teams have a bogey team or a bogey pitch or a bogey ground, usually that's in their mind. Like if two teams are quite similar, like we'll use Dublin, for example. If St. Jude's are playing Ballyboden and St. Jude's feel anytime we go to Ballyboden, we lose. And both teams are of equal ability as far as I'm concerned. So if that's the case, it's something going on in the mind and they're using the away thing as an excuse and they're not willing to do the mental work to figure out what is it about that. So it could be as simple as that. Definitely the referee comes into play. All referees will deny it because they don't want to be seen to be given bias. They're not doing it on purpose. It's just they're human beings like me and you. We're not robots and we are swayed by emotions and feelings and the air around us. So that if it's a marginal thing, that can make a difference. And it can just be sometimes you just don't like a place and you've just gone in with a negative mindset from the beginning and your negative mindset, what you want to achieve. Like if you need to surmount something in your head and your head is saying, oh, sure, we never win. Come on, like you don't have to be a source like to figure out that's not going to work out. And
relation then to superstitions, I suppose playing at home, a lot of players would have superstitions in their own home ground. Maybe like I know the dressing rooms aren't open at the moment, but you say back when they were open, sit in the same place, do the same thing. Would you say that feeds into as well if you're playing away from home?
Possibly. That comes down to your pre-performance. Is that a pre-performance routine or is it a superstition? Some people only play in the lucky jocks, the lucky socks, and then God forbid if one of the socks go missing, their day is crumbled. That's not good. But if you have a routine that, you know, you like to get up the day of a game and have a cup of tea in a specific mug or whatever, or you like to listen to cool down music, or I know one guy that I worked with, he's from a farming background and he loves to go out kind of after the cattle of the morning of a game. Didn't exert himself, but it just kept his head busy. So yeah, you have to ask yourself, is it a pre-performance routine? Is it helping me or is it hindering me? A superstition about sitting in a seat is kind of not going to be helpful to you if you're every second game, you're a different venue. But if your superstition is, I want to sit next to Michael at every game because I feed well off him, I feel he gives me good energy and we help each other, why not? That's the way to do it. But it just, again, and you see now why the importance of working with a decent sports psych is, because the trouble is people form these ideas in their heads. They might read books, they might listen to an interview with Pádraig Harrington where he talks about a swing, and all of a sudden then you see, you know, other golfers trying to implement this, or rugby players because they've listened to him. Different people, different sports, and it's pop psychology. And again, it comes back to my doctoring thing. You know, I don't say, God, I think he had a heart attack, maybe I did too. I think I'll do this because it worked for him. No, you work with a professional and you figure out, is it a quirk or is it something that can be worked on?
And then there's actually a question here from a Mayo man, like, would you feel that, like, is it just genuinely beaten by the better team, or would there might have been psychology as they kind of qualified for more All-Irelands? Oh, it's Dublin again. It's, yeah. Yeah. You know, I used to argue up until Dublin got to 5 in a row that Mayo were the most consistent team in the country. They mightn't like me hearing me saying it, but I always said they were kind of like Arsenal because they were there or thereabouts. Yeah.
You know, and that's a good record. You know, no other county, aside from the Kerrys of the world and maybe Tyrone for a while, were getting there. The trouble was they weren't getting over the finish line. Mm-hmm. Now, the argument is, if you look back with a cold eye on those teams, were they as good as the team they were playing? Maybe, maybe not. A lot of the time they might be missing that marquee player. And they were always playing like a me. There's somebody who just had that little bit extra, and it might just be the extra pace in one person's legs or whatever. And then, of course, obviously there were controversies as well. But again, that comes back to mindset. I mean, how many times have Dublin lost Johnny Cooper in a controversy. No, it was right. I mean, David Goff was right to send him off. But at the same time, Dublin was able to collectively dig deep and go into their reserves and still come out and pull a draw out of the fire. They had no business pulling a draw out that day. And so many other teams have done that. It's not that Dublin are hugely better than everyone else. And again, I say this with no experience of being in these camps, I'm only from watching on the outside. It's just they seem to be a little bit better organised. And what they also had was a better bench. I don't think anyone in Mayo could argue that. I'd say any time Mayo and Dublin played in the last few years, the two starting 15s were more or less on a par. But the difference was then the Mayo bench probably wasn't as strong as the Dublin bench. And they mightn't have been as smart either. And Dublin are cynical, you know, and they're getting away with it. And they're doing it in a way that's within the rules. So, you know, you can argue, is that within the rules of the game? Is it within, you know, the ethics? Or they're doing it? I would argue, so long as you're not breaking any rules and you're getting away with it and you're sticking to your process, as Jim Gavin would say at the time, go for it. And maybe other teams could have done with a bit of learning with that, because at the end of the day, if officials aren't clamping down on that kind of thing, you know, you got to match them with their own game or come up with another technique. I'm not sure other teams manage that. I think they're getting closer to it. But yeah, like absolutely as well, history and culture does play a role. But again, you know, there are ways to surmount it. Like Mayo have managed to come out of unbelievable games, winning no more than Dublin in finals, winning stuff they had no business winning, and coming out of places they had no business of coming out on. What you think about it, a small team on a stone in the west of Ireland with zero resources compared to other teams. And look, they're still always thereabouts. I mean, even look at last summer. How did they end up at that stage, you know, in the Super 8? And you see, you know, the clattering they got from Kerry, and the week after they turned around and they managed to beat Donegal. Nobody was expecting that. And then, you know, we saw they had their little, that game against Galway in the Gaelic grounds where somehow Galway didn't, and you know, people say, oh, of course you say that she's from Galway, but in the first half Galway didn't perform at all. Galway missed a penalty. Mayo got 2 fluky goals, and at the end of it they were still fighting to hold on. And Galway, a malfunctioning Galway with nearly half of the Galway footballers injured, Mayo still managed to win. So there is mental fortitude there. So I mean, I don't think it's fair to say they're mentally weaker than everybody else. It's just sometimes it comes down to the hop of the ball, and to sound like Neil, I'm right here, so you're 50-50, and it hasn't worked out for them. And the difference is, I suppose, and because I'm not in the camp, I don't know, are they turning every stone to figure out why? Have they found every player they need? We don't know this. So we're kind of talking in a vacuum. Could you blame them? No. When you look back on things, have they made mistakes? Yes, but find me a team that hasn't. Every team makes mistakes, just one team ends up making maybe one less than the other.
I suppose then we'll finish off with a few short questions. So, who are your sporting heroes?
Katie Taylor, Pádraig Joyce, Joe Connolly, Trace Marr, just the one. Breed Corkery, Niamh Briggs. And
speaking of Pádraig Joyce, do you think Galway can win on All-Ireland with Pádraig Joyce as manager?
Yes, and I also think they possibly could have won one under Kevin Welsh. He had the capabilities, and people may say that's controversial, and they will talk about, you know, defensive football. But again, people very quickly forget, and we use that game against Mayo, he was missing 10 starters that day. Could have been very different otherwise. And people often forget too that until Kevin Welsh came in, we were being beaten by the Sligos of the world. And again, that's no insult to Sligo, but you can't win All Ireland if we're beaten by Sligo. I think he definitely could have maybe brought them there. I mean, don't forget they're an All Ireland semi-final. Pádraig, I think, has brought an air of confidence and an air of panache, and I think he's brought the flair he had as a player in with his management. I don't think Kevin had flair. Kevin was a workhorse. Pádraig was also a workhorse, but he had a bit of style, and I think he's managed to bring that confidence along to his team. I was really looking forward actually to see them playing Mayo, and of course when the lockdown happened then I didn't get to see it. But yeah, why not? That's the beauty, I think, at the moment of the Galway setup. There's a possibility. Nobody says there's no way. Everyone's like, actually, it might happen. That's kind of cute.
Actually, there'll be a few Sligo people listening in, so they might be a bit controversial. But
like Sligo, actually use them as an example of a team achieving stuff they'd no business achieving back in the day, coming with no history, no background, and that surge they did in the early noughties. And again, that's why I always kind of worry about J structures. If there was a way in Croke Park could have looked at Sligo and say, geez, look at the work they're doing, and what can we do to support them to bring them through? I think we need more of that. You know, the Sligos, the Carlos, when they achieve something big, help them.
Yeah. And like I suppose they're actually doing very well in hurling at the moment as well. Many people say they're overachieving, so I suppose that kind of maybe they're trying to put hurling on the map in Sligo as well.
Exactly. And hurling, you could argue, has been neglected all over the place. In the line from Galway across to Dublin, all the way north of there, it's completely neglected. Using our own county as an example, I was never shown how to use a hurl. I was in football country. People in hurling country were never shown how to kick a football properly. And I just think it's madness for the county board to allow this to keep continuing, because we've got a massive pool of playing population on both sides. And I often think, like, I use my own parish as an example. Carrow's a senior team that's been senior since the late 80s. There's a lot of lads there who just won't make a senior team, but they might love to be a junior A hurling team. And that means within a generation or two, we could have a dual clubs all over Galway. Imagine what a powerhouse we'd be then.
Absolutely. And so who's your favourite sport person to interview, or who's been the highlights?
Tommy Welsh, obviously. Does he still count as a sports person even though he's retired?
In club hurling.
I enjoy interviewing Peter King, because you don't know what's going to come out of his mouth. I really enjoy interviewing James Lowe of Leinster, and he's going to qualify or naturalise, I think is the phrase they use, for Irish playing if he wants to from November. So it'll be interesting to see if he joins the Irish setup. He's great fun to interview because he's normal and natural, and he hasn't got the personality sucked out of him by PR people. I love actually the Galway Camogie team. The Sarah Dervins of the world are great to interview because they're open and honest, and they're not hiding anything. There's no agendas with them. They see a microphone, they see an opportunity to promote themselves, and they go for it. And I think that's wonderful. Cora Staunton's great. You learn a lot from her. I really enjoy it. It's funny, like, it depends on the context and everything. Like, I remember last year we did an off the ball special from the Dáil Bar in Galway with the Means. I think you can actually find that on YouTube and stuff. And how would I put this? I would never say the dream is to interview the Means, because obviously I'd see a lot of them around all the time. Don't get me wrong, they're heroes in their own right. But we had a great evening, the three of them just reminiscing, going down memory lane. It was great fun. So I think it's not so much a person who's brilliant to interview, it's how much they're willing to come along with it and share their stories and their experience to the audience who's listening. We're very lucky to have come across some really cool people. And then, God, you find some other people and you're like, it's like getting blood from a stone. Like, why are you bothering? Why have I been sent here?
Like, I find that myself when I'm trying to get people on here. Like, I don't want people, as you said, are, dragged by PR people that it's just copy and paste answers all the time.
It's boring as hell.
All the time. Like, I interviewed a musician and kind of a fella that was looking to do very well in soccer over in America, and like, even I just asked them why do they do what they do, and they just said, like, it's not just the parish or me mum and me dad, whatever. It's just the love of it and kind of the proper love. They explain how, like, they grew up from. They just have loved it since a young age.
Yeah, there's something worse than that bland vanilla stuff. Like, it's a waste of my time, it's a waste of the person talking to me, and even worse, it's a waste of the person. Like, if you think about it, if they bought a TV license and that's what they're listening to on the TV, or if they bought the Irish Independent, that's their reading. Nobody wants it.
Yeah. And then let me see now. And a question here from A.O. Quillon, lecturer of mine. Did you have a...
I did.
Do you see yourself one day returning to Oncaharua?
Absolutely. It's the plan. If I could just get beyond rules like planning permissions, mortgages, finding a job that, that would pay for me to live in Connemara, absolutely. I'd be very surprised if I didn't end up back there. I have to get through this degree first of all. I have to get a few years of doctoring under my belt before I'm in a position to choose where I work and live. But if I don't get to Carroll, I'll be very near it. So Aberle Egg, my Malasha Hontal, Balski.
And finally, your favourite food from Supermacs?
Oh, my favourite food, there's two versions. There's when I'm eating in, it's the large fried cheese chips, a cheeseburger, and a Diet Coke. If I'm eating out and there's nobody watching me, it's a big, greasy snack box, a portion of garlic sauce. Because you'll go over the hand with the face, and nobody needs to see that. But if you're in the car, it's grand.
That's perfect. So we'll leave it at that. Sin é Máire Treasa. Gur maith agat.
Okay, gur míle maith.